it's a celebration, it's fun, it's joyful. And then I broke 3, and then I, ran 45 miles, and like all of these other things happened with the caveat that they didn't happen until I found that approach. And so I'm curious how you landed on that, like from the jump.
My entry to running was, I think most people's, you kind of finish college, you get in your mid-20s, you get in your later 20s, and the stuff you're getting away with at 19, you're suddenly not getting away with at 29. And, you go out for a night of nachos and chicken wings, and a couple of weeks later, you realize you're about 7, 8, 10 pounds heavier, and it's not going away. So my initiation of running, like most people's, was a reaction to food. Like, okay, you know what? I got to lose a few pounds, or if I want to keep drinking, I better start running. And so you go out there and you try to bash out a few miles, and you have the mindset of like, well, if I'm not uncomfortable, then I'm not doing it right. If I'm not breathing hard, if I'm not in pain, then I'm doing it wrong. The idea was that running is a punishment. Hey, I eat a lot of food, I better punish myself if I would be uncomfortable. So I was on that cycle, constantly getting injured, never enjoying it, trying to put artificial goals in front of myself. Like, hey, you know what? I better train for this race in 4 months. Otherwise, I won't run at all. And this becomes, to me, a very self-defeating hamster wheel of I'm only running as a punishment. It should feel like a punishment or I'm not doing it right. I better set a goal so that if I don't do that goal, it's a punishment, and become a constant punishment cycle. And then, I got injured a ton and then stopped running for years. And that's when, I got an inkling that there was this tribe, and it started the whole Copper Canyon Tarahumara adventure. And that to me was that kind of lightning bolt moment that I get down to the canyons and I'm watching people run. And like, well, they're not punishing themselves. They're having a good time. They're laughing, they're talking, they're partying, yet they're running way better than I am. And I come back and I share this with Eric Orton, who I just met for the first time, coincidentally, because I was contracted to write a magazine article about him. And I said, yeah, it's weird, dude. I met this tribe and they seem like they're having fun. Like, I can't make sense of it. And he could. He explained it to me. And this is the key. Here's the thing, Jonathan, is that if humans truly evolved to run, then it should be a pleasure cycle, not a punishment cycle. Because anything that's pleasurable, you're going to want to repeat that process. Your body's going to signal to you, this is a good thing. Anything that's a punishment, your body's going to pull away from. And so no matter how much you try to mentally overcome those obstacles, if you don't like it, at some point you will quit. If you do like it, you will be rewarded and want to continue it. And so that's when you open my eyes to the fact that if you run within yourself with a sense of joy, then you will get the performance goals that you want. But it's also not a simple process. It doesn't mean just go out and jog or smile. It means dialing in your form, your fitness, your footwear, your food, getting all these things dialed in so every run feels like a victory lap.
I love that. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are listening and saying, okay, that sounds good in practice. He's making it sound super easy. And it's that next step of, okay, it's not enough just to believe this to be true. You have to live it. So how did you translate it from doing it because of the food, doing it because, you like beer, that kind of a thing, into, going out running as far as you want and having it truly be joyful?
So there are a couple of things that I think are crucial. And one is to address each thing individually. So, one of the difficulties we have is we got a lot going on in our lives. We have a lot in our schedules. And so we tend to isolate running as this like 45 minutes we can do in the morning before we rush out the door. What I was trying to get at was, what's a way I can look at food, I can look at footwear, I can look at form, treat each one of those things as something to dial in, but constantly contributing to this goal of not going faster, but going happier, so that every run starts to feel good. So let me give you an example. Food, for instance. It is really hard to dial in food. You have a million different approaches to how to dial in food. Most people come from an abstinence model that, well, I better give up this or I better give up that. But they don't really know if the thing they're giving up is actually benefiting or not. And so one thing I like to do is a thing called the 2-week test, where you remove all the high glycemic foods from your diet for 14 days. And at the end of 14 days, you reintroduce a couple of foods one at a time. So let's say you get rid of all the rice, pasta, breads, pastries, all gone for 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, you have a sandwich built on one piece of bread. Put some lunch meat on a piece of bread, fold it over, eat that sandwich. How do you feel? If you feel good, now you know you've locked in on a carbohydrate level that's good for you. Then eat a sandwich with 2 pieces of bread. See how you feel. If you feel sluggish, bloated, that means you're jacking your insulin too high.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. If only there were a way to measure internally, which
right.
I joke because that's my day job.
Do you find those two approaches compatible? Or what if you did the 2 week test?
So food sensitivity testing is not very accurate and not very strong. So the model or the method that you outlined there is an excellent way to diagnose or understand specific foods that don't make you feel good. So you're absolutely on the right track from an evidence-based standpoint on that aspect of it. On the flip side, you can skip some of the trial and error aspect of what you were talking about in regards to, like, if you remove something, well, what if your body needed it? That's the part that we're sort of seeking to address, and then understanding what else do you need that you're not currently using or eating.
Yeah. So to me, that's the perfect marriage of physiology and technology. And I think most of us tend to err on the side of technology. We want to rely on our devices for everything. And the difficulty with that is at some point it becomes inconvenience, or you don't have the device, or it's too complicated, so you stop. And if there's a way of matching what you've learned from data with what you actually feel. So here's another perfect example, like heart rate monitors. So the idea of running heart rate zones is terrific, but the chest strap is kind of a pain in the ass. It's inconvenient, gets sweaty, gets kind of funky and smelly. The wrist monitors aren't really that accurate. So running within heart rate zones is, I believe, crucially important for getting into that sort of happiness cycle of where you're actually running and you're not putting yourself into anaerobic deck and you're giving yourself recovery time. But I think relying on the device all the time is a recipe for failure. With heart rates, I was looking back at what Julius Caesar did with the Roman centurions, because the Roman centurions were like the fastest foot speed army in history, and probably unmatched to this day. These dudes could cover 50 miles of rough terrain in like 30 hours. They were unbelievably quick, and with their heavy gear on. And what Caesar did was he would train them by pace, and the way you train by pace was the same thing Arthur Lydiard did. It was by conversational rate. And so if you could maintain a constant talking pace, that was one gear. If it was call and response, where I say something, someone else says it back. So you talk, silence, that's another pace. Singing pace is a third pace, where you can actually run rhythmically, but you're singing in a rhythm. So he set these three paces: conversational, call and response, singing. And those essentially lock in with 3 different heart rate zones. And so you can actually sort of dial in that for yourself. Now, am I at a pace where I can talk comfortably with a friend? Am I at a friend where I can only at a pace where I can only gasp out a few words? That will tell you what heart rate zone you're in.